Welcome, dear listeners, to the shadowed halls of Throne of Nightmares, where the forgotten whispers of the damned rise from their graves to claw at the edges of your sanity. I am your host, the Keeper of Curses, and tonight we venture into the abyssal depths of the Atlantic, a vast, unforgiving expanse where the line between life and death dissolves like salt in the tide. Imagine, if you will, the year 1847, aboard a creaking vessel named the Eternal Drift, slicing through waves that roar like the jaws of some primordial beast. The air is thick with the brine of salt and the metallic tang of blood carried on winds that howl secrets from forgotten shores. Picture the scene. The ship rolls in the grip of a tempest, lanterns swinging wildly in the gloom, casting elongated shadows that dance like specters across the decks. Below, in the bowels of this floating coffin, a man huddles over a blood-slicked table. His hands steady as a hangman's noose, wield needle and thread, not to mend the wounds of the living, but to weave the flesh of the departed into the bodies of those who yet breathe. This is no mere surgeon, this is Dr. Elias Crow, the architect of abominations, the one who dared to stitch the living with the dead. They called his creations the bone, weaved hybrids of corpse and crewman, shambling horrors that defied the natural order, their eyes glassy with the void, their limbs twitching with stolen life. But why, you ask? What madness drove a learned man to such profane arts? That is the hook that pulls you deeper into the nightmare. It begins with a promise, a vow to conquer death itself, born from the ashes of personal tragedy. Elias Crow was no monster at birth. He was forged in the fires of loss, on the bloodied fields of forgotten wars and the pestilent streets of Victorian London. Yet, as the Eternal Drift plowed through the Atlantic's maw, bound for the New World with a cargo of desperate souls, Crow's experiments turned the ship into a drifting charnel house. Whispers spread among the crewy men vanishing in the night, only to return changed. Limbs replaced with those harvested from the fallen, hearts pulsing with the rhythm of the grave. Feel the chill now as the wind picks up in your mind's eye. The ocean is not just water, it's a graveyard littered with the bones of 1,000 wrecks. Sharks circle below, drawn by the scent of unnatural blood seeping through the hole, and above, the stars mock the hubris of man, twinkling like the eyes of gods who have long abandoned us. This tale, The Bones of the Atlantic, is not for the faint of heart. It is a descent into the horrors of resurrection, where the dead do not rest, and the living pay the price for tampering with the eternal sleep. As we delve deeper, remember the Atlantic remembers. It holds its grudges in the deep, where pressure crushes bones to dust and currents carry echoes of screams across centuries. Crow's story is one of ambition unchecked, a surgeon's scalpel carving not just flesh, but the very fabric of reality. Listen closely, for in the silence between waves, you might hear the faint stitch of thread pulling through skin. The sound of the undead awakening. Let us begin our voyage. The fog rolls in, thick and cloying, wrapping around your thoughts like a shroud. You are aboard now, trapped in the narrative's grip. There is no turning back. The Eternal Drift was no ordinary ship. Launched from the fog-shrouded docks of Liverpool in the spring of 1847, she was a bark of sturdy oak and iron, her masts reaching skyward like skeletal fingers grasping for salvation. Her hold brimmed with emigrants fleeing the Great Famine, Irish souls with hollow eyes and hollower bellies, dreaming of America's golden shores, but dreams sour at sea turning to nightmares under the relentless assault of storms and sickness. Typhus stalked the decks, claiming lives with feverish claws, bodies wrapped in canvas and consigned to the waves. It was in this cauldron of despair that Dr. Elias Crow found his canvas. Crow was a man of middling years, his face etched with the lines of a life spent in dissection rooms and battlefields. Tall and gaunt, with hair as black as a raven's wing and eyes that burned with an inner fire, he carried the weight of secrets in his surgeon's kit. Born in Edinburgh to a family of anatomists, he had studied under the great resurrectionists, those grave robbers who supplied cadavers to medical schools in the dead of night. But Crow's ambitions stretched beyond mere study. He believed death was not an end, but a puzzle to be solved, pieces to be rearranged. The Hook Titans on the eve of departure, Crow received word of his wife's death back home, claimed by consumption, her body wasting away while he prepared for the voyage. In his grief, he smuggled aboard a forbidden cargo vials of alchemical elixirs, stolen from occult societies, and a journal of forbidden rites penned by Paracelsus himself. As the ship left port, the Atlantic welcomed them with open arms, a deceptive calm that hid the tempest to come. Now imagine the first night at sea, the emigrants huddled below, their coughs echoing like accusations. Crow, in his cramped cabin, lit by a single flickering candle, pored over his notes. "The flesh remembers," he whispered to the shadows. "It can be taught to forget death." Little did the crew know, their surgeon was about to turn their vessel into a laboratory of the macabre. As days blurred into weeks, the first signs appeared. A sailor named O'Brien fell from the rigging, his leg shattered like driftwood. In the surgery, Crow worked his dark magic, not just setting the bone, but grafting a limb from a fresh corpse, one of the famine's victims who had succumbed that very morn. Thread by thread, he stitched, his elixir coating the seams to coax life into the dead flesh. When O'Brien awoke, his new leg moved, but with a jerking, unnatural gait. As if puppeteered by strings from the beyond, whispers spread like gangrene. "The doctor's a warlock," muttered the boatswain. "He dances with the devil in the hold." But fear kept mouths shut after all. Who else could mend the broken in this floating hell? The atmosphere thickens. Storms lash the ship, waves towering like vengeful giants, slamming against the hull with thunderous fury. In the chaos, more fell ill, more died, and more became fodder for Crow's needle. The bone, weaved, multiplied in secret. A cabin boy with eyes from a drowned man, seeing visions of the deep. A cook whose arm, replaced with that of a murderer hanged in port, twitched toward knives unbidden. Feel the dread building, listeners. The Atlantic is alive, its currents whispering temptations to those who listen. Crow heard them, in the creak of timbers and the splash of waves, promises of immortality, if only he pushed further. But with each stitch, the veil between worlds thinned, and something ancient stirred in the depths below. This is just the beginning. The eternal drift sails on, into the heart of darkness. Stay with me, for the nightmares are only awakening. And so the eternal drift pressed onward, her sails billowed by winds that carried the scent of decay from distant lands. Let us descend now into the heart of the tale, where the characters emerge from the fog like ghosts materializing at a seance. Dr. Elias Crow, our tormented protagonist, was not always a harbinger of horrors. Born in 1805 to a lineage of Scottish physicians, he grew up amidst the clatter of bones in his father's anatomy theatre. The air there was thick with formaldehyde, and the faint rot of cadavers, a perfume that seeped into his soul. As a boy, he watched dissections with wide-eyed fascination, his small hands tracing the veins of the dead as if mapping roads to resurrection. But tragedy sculpted him. At university in Edinburgh, he fell in love with Amelia, a delicate flower of the moors, her laughter like bells in the mist. They wed young, but fate is a cruel cartographer. Amelia bore a child, only for both to be claimed by childbirth's bloody toll. Crow, shattered, turned to the occult, raiding libraries for tomes on vitalism, the spark of life that philosophers like Galvani chased with electric jolts. If God can animate clay, he reasoned in his journals, why not man animate flesh? The eternal drift was his exile and his laboratory. Captain Harlan Voss, a grizzled veteran of the Napoleonic Wars, commanded the ship, a man with a beard like tangled seaweed and eyes scarred by cannon fire. Voss trusted Crow, having seen his skill on previous voyages, patching sailors amid the roar of battle. "You're a miracle worker, Doc," Voss would grunt, clapping a hand on Crow's shoulder. Little did he know the miracles were laced with maledictions. Among the passengers, key figures loomed. There was Moira O'Sullivan, an Irish widow with fiery red hair and a tongue sharp as a harpoon. Fleeing the potato blight with her 2 young sons, she carried tales of the seedy, the fairy folk who stole souls, and eyed Crow with suspicion from the start. With the look of one who's danced with the dead, she warned him once, her voice a low hiss in the lantern light. Then there was young Liam, a deckhand of barely 18, with sun-bleached hair and a boyish grin that hid a thirst for adventure. Liam idolized Crow, assisting in the surgery, fetching tools with eager hands. "Teach me, sir," he'd beg. "I want to heal like you." Oh, the irony. Listeners, the boy would learn far more than he bargained for. The voyage began innocently enough. Departing Liverpool under a leaden sky, the ship groaned as she met the open sea. The Atlantic welcomed them with deceptive gentleness, waves lapping like a lover's caress. But soon, the first storm hit, a maelstrom that turned the ocean into a churning abyss. Lightning forked across the heavens. Illuminating faces twisted in terror. In the hold, emigrants prayed to saints long forgotten, their voices a cacophony drowned by thunder. It was during this tempest that the first event unfolded. Sailor O'Brien, as I mentioned, plummeted from the foremast, his scream swallowed by the gale. Dragged below, his leg mangled beyond repair, he begged for amputation. But Crow saw opportunity. "Trust me," he murmured, administering laudanum laced with his elixir, a brew of mercury opium, and extracts from rare, deep sea fungi smuggled from the Indies. In the flickering light of the surgery, Crow worked. The air reeked of blood and ozone from the storm. He severed the ruined leg with a bone saw's grating whine, then retrieved a cadaver from the makeshift morgue. A fresh one, a famine victim named Declan, whose body still held warmth from fever's final embrace. With precise stitches, Crow aligned vein to vein, muscle to muscle, coating each seam with his viscous serum. Hours passed, the ship pitching like a beast in agony. When O'Brien awoke, the pain was gone. He flexed the new limb, toes curling in response. "By God, Doc, it's a miracle!" But as night fell, the changes began. The skin paled to a cadaverous grey, veins pulsing black beneath. O'Brien's dreams filled with visions not his own. Memories of Declan's starving village, the wail of banshees on the wind. Tension built slowly. More fell ill, typhus spread like wildfire, bodies piling in the hold. Crow harvested discreetly, his journal filling with notes. The graft takes hold, the host's vitality infuses the dead tissue. But echoes linger, whispers from the grave. One moonless night, Moira confronted him. Sneaking into his cabin, she found sketches, grotesque diagrams of hybrid beings, limbs interchanged like puzzle pieces. "What devilry is this?" she demanded, her eyes blazing. Crow, cornered, revealed a fraction. "I'm saving them, woman. Death need not be final." But Moira saw the madness, the god complex gleaming in his gaze. Meanwhile, Liam discovered the truth accidentally. Assisting with a procedure, he watched Crow revive a drowned man, pulled from the waves after a rogue swell. With a heart stitched from 2 corpses, the man gasped back to life, but his chest heaved unevenly, one side rotting even as the other pulsed. The crew murmured. Shadows seemed longer, the ship colder. Strange occurrences, tools moving on their own, faint moans from the bilge. The Atlantic, sensing the violation, stirred its depths. Whales breached nearby, their songs warped into dirges. As part-eye draws to a close, the stage is set. Crow's experiments escalate, the bone-weaved multiply in hiding. But the sea is patient, waiting to claim its due. The horrors are just beginning to surface. Deeper we plunge, listeners, into the maelstrom of madness aboard the Eternal Drift. The ship, now a vessel of the damned, cut through fog banks thick as shrouds, the air heavy with the stench of decay and desperation. Doctor. Crow's hubris swelled like the sails in a gale, his surgeries becoming bolder, his creations more grotesque. The bone, weaved no longer hid in shadows, they shuffled the decks at night, their stitches weeping puss, their eyes reflecting the abyss. Conflict erupted with Captain Voss. One fateful dawn, as the sun bled red over the horizon, Voss discovered O'Brien in the rigging. The sailor's grafted leg had begun to change. Flesh sloughed off in patches, revealing bone etched with unnatural runes, as if the dead tissue rebelled. O'Brien, raving, claimed voices urged him to return to the deep. Voss confronted Crow in the surgery, pistol drawn. "What have ye done, man? This ain't healing. It's necromancy." Crow, unflinching, defended his work. "I've conquered death, Captain. Imagine an immortal crew, unbound by frailty. But Voss saw the horror the hold now a lair of abominations, men moaning in eternal torment. A struggle ensued. Voss fired, grazing Crow's shoulder. In the melee, a bone weaved. The revived drowned man lurched forward, its mismatched hands crushing Voss's throat. The captain's body joined the harvest. With Voss dead, chaos reigned. Moira rallied the passengers, arming them with makeshift weapons, belaying pins and knives. "The doctor's a fiend!" she cried. "He's stitching us to the devil's quilt." Liam, torn between loyalty and fear, sided with Crow at first, helping restrain mutineers. But as he witnessed a child grafted with adult limbs, screaming in agony as the body rejected the mismatch, his resolve cracked. Haunting events multiplied. Storms battered the ship relentlessly, as if the Atlantic punished the transgression. Waves whispered names of the dead, luring sailors overboard. One night, a bone-weaved broke free, rampaging through the decks, its body a patchwork of crewmen lost. It tore at its stitches, howling, "Not mine!" before leaping into the sea, sharks feasting in a frenzy of foam and blood. Crow, descending into delirium, pushed further. He attempted his masterpiece, stitching himself with parts from Amelia's preserved locket, a lock of hair, but infused with elixir to summon her essence. Visions plagued him, Amelia's ghost, pale and accusing, wandering the corridors. "You've awakened the hungry ones," she murmured in his dreams. The climax built during the Great Gale, a hurricane that turned the ocean into a vortex of wrath. The ship listed, masts snapping like bones. In the hold, the bone weaved rose as one, their collective agony birthing a hive mind. They turned on the living, grafting unwilling victims in an orgy of stitches and screams. Moira, cornered, fought valiantly, her sons hidden behind her. "Back, ye abominations!" she spat, swinging a lantern that set a sail ablaze. Liam, betraying Crow, freed the mutineers. They stormed the surgery, finding the doctor mid-procedure, attempting to revive Voss with parts from multiple corpses. "It's for the greater good," Crow pleaded. But Liam drove a scalpel into his hand. In the struggle, the elixir vials shattered, spilling across the floor, igniting in alchemical fire. As the ship burned, the Atlantic claimed her prize. Waves breached the hull, flooding the decks. The bone, weaved unbound, dissolved into the brine, their stitches unraveling like forgotten promises. Crow, clinging to the rail, watched his creations sink, their eyes meeting his in silent reproach. But not all ends there. Whispers persist. The eternal drift became a ghost ship, adrift eternally, her surgeon still stitching in the depths. To truly grasp the chill of this tale, we must unearth the bones of history that underpin it. The real horrors of the Atlantic crossings, blended with the folklore that haunts the waves. The mid-19th century was an era of desperation and discovery, where ships like the Eternal Drift ferried millions across the ocean's maw. The Irish potato famine or Angortamara drove over 1 million souls to emigrate between 1845 and 1852, many aboard coffin ships, vessels riddled with disease, where death rates soared to 30%. Typhus, known as ship fever, ravaged passengers, bodies dumped overboard in rituals as cold as the sea. Surgery at sea was a barbaric art. Ship surgeons, often poorly trained, wielded saws and lancets in rolling holds, amputations performed without anesthesia until ether's advent in 1846. But darker practices lurk. Resurrectionists or body snatchers plagued Britain, digging up graves for medical schools. Figures like William Burke and William Hare murdered for cadavers, selling to anatomists like Robert Knox. Crow echoes these men, his grafts reminiscent of early transplant attempts, though fiction amplifies the macabre. The Atlantic itself is steeped in legend. Ghost ships like the Mary Celeste, abandoned in 1872, fuel tales of vanishing crews, perhaps claimed by unnatural forces. In Irish folklore, the seedy intermingle with sea myths. The Merrow mermaid, like beings who lure sailors to watery graves, or the Dullahan, headless riders portending death. Moira's warnings draw from this, blending Celtic superstitions with the trauma of famine ships. Culturally, the era grappled with vitalism, the quest to define life's spark. Luigi Galvani's experiments with frog legs twitching under electricity inspired Mary Shelley's Frankenstein's 1880, a direct parallel to Crow's hubris. Alchemists like Paracelsus, mentioned in Crow's journals, sought homunculi, artificial life mirroring the bone weaved. Broader context, the transatlantic slave trade, ending in 1807 but echoing in immigrant voyages where bodies were commodified, whiling ships like those in Moby Dick's 1851. Faced isolation and madness, storms birthing legends of sea monsters, the Kraken or Leviathan, stirred by human transgression. Eerily, real accounts exist: the Zong Massacre, 1781, where slaves were thrown overboard for insurance, their bones littering the Atlantic floor. Such atrocities lend authenticity to our tales, bones, symbolizing forgotten victims rising in vengeance. Blend fact and folklore, sailors' yarns of stitchers, mythical figures who mend ships with human sinew, or voodoo practices from African diaspora, where zombies, undead slaves, parallel the bone weaved. In this unsettling authenticity, the story resonates, reminding us the sea holds history's horrors, waiting to surface. Beneath the surface of this nightmare lies a labyrinth of symbols and psychological depths, connecting to universal fears that gnaw at humanity's core. At its heart, The Bones of the Atlantic explores hubris, the Promethean sin of playing God. Crow, like Frankenstein's Victor, defies natural boundaries, stitching life from death only to unleash chaos. This reflects cultural trauma, the 19th century's scientific zeal clashing with religious dread, birthing existential terror. What is the soul if flesh can be rearranged? Thematically, the story delves into the boundary between life and death, a porous veil in folklore. The bone-weaved embody liminality, neither alive nor dead, trapped in purgatory. This mirrors human fears of incomplete death. Burial at sea, without proper rites, invites restless spirits, as in sailors' superstitions. Psychologically, it taps into body horror, the violation of corporeal integrity, evoking revulsion at transplants or modern bioethics debates. Universal fears abound. Isolation on the vast ocean symbolizes existential loneliness, the ship a microcosm of society crumbling under madness. The Atlantic as antagonist represents nature's indifference, punishing transgression with storms, a metaphor for ecological backlash or colonial overreach. As Europeans stitched new worlds from stolen lands, human nature's dark side emerges. Crow's grief-driven ambition highlights how loss corrupts, turning mourning into monstrosity. Moira embodies resilience, her folklore a shield against modernity's horrors. Liem's betrayal probes loyalty's fragility under moral strain. Culturally, it connects to trauma. Famine, emigrants, displacement echoes refugee crisis, the bone weaved symbolizing fragmented identities. Thematically, it critiques exploitation, bodies as resources, paralleling slavery or industrial labor. In an ominous lens, the tale warns of resurrection's cost. The dead bring baggage, memories, curses, eroding the living. It leaves us questioning, in conquering death, do we invite eternal nightmare? As the waves subside in our tale, the eternal drift fades into legend, a spectral silhouette on the horizon, her decks echoing with the eternal stitch of needle through flesh. Dr. Elias Crow, last seen clinging to wreckage, vanished into the deep, perhaps becoming one with his creations, a eternal surgeon in the abyss. The survivors, if any, washed ashore in fragments, their stories dismissed as delirium. Yet, the bones of the Atlantic endure, a reminder that some secrets should remain buried. What lingers is the question in our quest to defy death. Do we not invite it closer? Listen to the sea tonight, it whispers still. Thank you for joining Throne of Nightmares. Until next time, may your dreams be merciful or not.